Now, top focus on this morning. US President Joe Biden and the Republican leaders offered hope of a deal that could avoid an unprecedented debt default given the huge ramifications. However, the big challenges remain. The White House has announced Biden would be shortening his upcoming Asia tour after the latest negotiations ended without a breakthrough. The Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said there was still a lot of work to do. While the stark differences remained, the White House said Biden was optimistic that there is a path to a responsible bipartisan budget agreement. On Monday, the Treasury Secretary said that the U.S. could begin defaulting potentially as early as on June 1st, while the non-partisan Congressional Budget Office has forecast June 15th. The Treasury has warned of grim consequences if the country runs out of cash to pay its bills, which would leave it unable to pay the federal workers. It would trigger a likely surge in the interest rates with a knock-on effect for the businesses and also the global markets. The White House further said that Biden had directed his staff to continue to meet daily on these outstanding issues. The U.S. president would confer with the Republican leaders on his return from the G7 meetings. Biden, who is set to attend the G7 summit in Japan, scrapped an onward journey to Papua New Guinea and the AUKUS summit in Australia. Instead, he will be returning to Washington from Hiroshima on Sunday itself.
That defaulting on the debt is simply not an option. Our economy would fall into recession. It would devastate retirement accounts, increase borrowing costs, and according to Moody's, nearly 8 million Americans would lose their jobs and our international reputation would be damaged in the extreme if we were to let that happen. It's disappointing that our discussions of the congressional Republicans have not been willing to discuss raising revenues, but the policy differences between the parties should not stop Congress from avoiding default.
In a sign of nervousness over what would be the first ever U.S. debt default, over 140 CEOs sent a letter to Biden and the congressional leaders, stressing the need for an agreement. The letter, signed by the chief executives from Pfizer and Morgan Stanley, among others, stated that the U.S. must avert the potentially devastating scenario. Now remember, the Republicans regained control of the House in the 2022 midterm elections. They're demanding cuts of $130 billion from the federal agencies and the programs in exchange for support for lifting the debt ceiling. This would further limit spending in the 2024 fiscal year to 2022 levels. The Republicans also want to expedite domestic energy production projects, simplify the process for obtaining permits for pipelines and refineries, and also claw back unspent COVID relief funding.
We've got to find a way that we can curb our spending, raise our debt limit, and also grow our economy. Now, I wish we had been able to be in this place 100 days ago. This is what we requested, but we are where we are.
On the other hand, the Democrats are calling for a clean increase of the borrowing limit with no strings attached. They have accused the Republicans of using extreme tactics to push their agenda ahead of the so-called X date at which the U.S. starts defaulting on its debts. Meanwhile, some senators have also acknowledged that they may have to cancel the Memorial Day recess beginning Thursday to get a deal finalized. As the X date draws closer, Democrats in Congress have begun considering a range of alternatives, including using a congressional procedure to bypass McCarthy. They've also contemplated asking Biden to invoke the 14th Amendment to raise the debt ceiling unilaterally. Biden, meanwhile, has cautioned that such a move could be challenged in the court and has continued to call publicly for Republicans to support a clean increase to the debt ceiling.